you'll learn a lot. So I can guarantee you by the end of the Peter Farrell Cup, what you will learn in this process, you cannot unlearn it, and you'll never see the world the same way again. It's like having a superpower. Seriously. So what we're going to cover off tonight is last year with a lot of the applications, we had a lot of solutions looking for a problem submitted. Right? So to make your bid as competitive as possible, we wanted to sort of give a couple of the really key considerations we just wanted you to think about. We don't expect you to have all of this complete by the time you put your application in next week, but there are a couple of really critical things that you need to actually articulate to the assessors that you understand about the problem you're solving, that your solution is providing to that customer segment. And so we'll touch on some of that tonight. So there are some things here tonight that I'm going to show you. If you can get it done by next week, awesome, which is particularly around validating your idea and actually getting out and testing your idea in front of your customers. If you don't worry about it. There's only two things by the end of tonight that we really want you to start thinking about. One is the problem statement. And we've got some handouts that we'll actually hand out partway through to actually think about who's your customer, what's the problem you're solving, what's the niche, what are the existing competitive products out there, what's your value proposition for what you're proposing, and how does that actually help customers, and what's the size of the market. So it's, can I do this, should I do this, do they want it? I really aren't answering those type of questions. And then the other one's also the key assumptions. So at the moment, you've probably got an idea. Might be for an app, might be for a product, and there'll be a whole stack of assumptions attached to that. So you're guessing that people will be willing to pay $5 million for your business idea, or people will be willing to download your app, or people will be willing to buy your product. Right? There's probably a whole set of assumptions. And as you go through the Peter Farrell Cup process, we'll teach you some skills and some ways to actually go through and turn all those assumptions into facts. All right, and we'll teach you that. So, but today we're really talking about idea validation, and when I say idea validation, it's really making sure you understand the problem statement. You already know who I am. So why don't we go through and start off with a story first of all about someone who built an amazing product, and they built it right. It was an amazing piece of engineering, but the question was, did they build the right product? All right, I'll tell you that story. Some of you might be too young to know what that product is, but we'll see how we go. I want to touch on the number one reason why startups fail. And you guys will be doing a little bit of work here, so I'm going to have to throw the question out and we'll see if people can guess what that is. And then we're going to go through a process of how to test your ideas and get your idea ready for application. So of these, as part of this PFC process, you'll go through all of these steps, but for your application next week, the most important ones are step 1 and step 2. Right? Make sure you understand and can articulate the problem that you're solving with your idea, and also make sure you can articulate where those assumptions are and what you want to test and what you want to get out of the PFC. That's the two ones. If you've got time to do step 3 in a very basic way before next week, that would be amazing, and then we'll get stuck into some examples. Alright, so this is a guy called Jeff Hawkins. Now Jeff is actually more famously known these days for his work in neuroscience, but he was involved in a tech company. And first thing, some of you may not be old enough to know what it is. So this is called the GridPad. So this was the predecessor to the iPad. Right? So this was the first handheld computer. Right? And Jeff and his team in a company called Palm actually developed this product. It was an amazing piece of engineering. Right? This is in the early 90s. They built this particular product. Amazing piece of engineering. It had all the same capabilities of any desktop computer back then. It had a touch screen. Amazing, packed into this tiny little space, and just the engineering and the electronics alone was amazing. And so they could not have built, in terms of what this product was meant to do, they couldn't have built it any better. The problem was, no one bought it, right? It was a complete flop as a product, because it was big, it was clunky, sure it was handheld, but you had to weigh a ton, people had to carry it around with them. So what they did is they built it right, but they actually didn't build the right product, because the customer didn't actually want that particular solution. It didn't actually provide a solution for what customers were trying to do. So he was a bit frustrated by this, and they sat around amongst their team and sort of brainstormed about what to do next. And they truly believed that people wanted handheld computers. Right? So this is a predecessor to the iPad, and there's probably a room full of smartphones these days. They truly believed that people actually wanted to hold a computer in their hand. But they weren't really, they were a bit burnt by this process. So in order to test his idea, what they decided was, one of the key assumptions, so they said, yeah, the problem is people want to carry a handheld computer around, but one of the assumptions they had was, well, how big, and what's it going to do? So to test the idea, instead of building a computer, Jeff got out a bit of wood, went down to his workshop, he got a piece of wood, right? And he cut out. And what they decided was that if they're going to a handheld computer, it needed to be small enough to fit in someone's shirt pocket. Right? And that was an assumption. So what they did is he went and got a piece of wood and he actually stuck it in his pocket. And everywhere he went, he talked to people and they say, oh, we've got this meeting next week, he'd pull out this fake bit of wood and he'd pretend to write on it or pretend to type on it. And he did this for months before they even built a single product. And what he found was that every day as he did this, he had this little piece of wood in his pocket, and then people were looking at him like it was crazy, but he'd get it out, and someone would go, oh, look, can we have a meeting next week? And he'd pull it out and he'd pretend to like do a booking on his computer. What he found was in the grid pad, it did everything. You could access documents, you could do spreadsheets, you could do all sorts of great stuff with databases. But what I actually found was this thing in his pocket, he only used it for 3 things. Right? And this was just, he did this all himself, literally probably a 20-cent piece of wood. He actually did little bits of paper, like this is from a museum, so this is the actual thing. He actually got little bits of paper and he stuck like a fake screen on the front of it. And what he found, all he used it for was keep his contacts, so put something that people would hand him a business card, so that was annoying, so he'd actually just put the contact details inside this thing. He'd use it to make appointments and he'd use it as a to-do list. And that was the only 3 functions. Everything else, he never really found a reason for his handheld computer. And so what he ended up building was this, which is the palm pilot. Now, some of you may not be old enough to remember this, but this is the predecessor to the iPhone. Right? So, and this is one of the top selling devices in the world when it came out. And that's all it did. You could do a to-do list, you could get your contacts on it, and you could make appointments. And it was super successful because it was solving a problem for the customer. All right? So they both the idea was to provide people with a handheld computer. Right? So the grid pad, the predecessor to this, still was that idea. The problem was it didn't solve a problem for your customer. So, when you're thinking about your particular idea, and this is one thing across this whole Feasibility Cup, the one thing you'll hear me say over and over again, what is the problem you are solving and for whom? All right. So now, there's lots of stats floating around. I don't know if this is the actual one. This is from a source that 70% of startups fail. I think if you're doing hardware, it's like 95% of startups fail if you're doing a hardware startup. But let's just run with this at the moment because I have a reference and I can back it up and it's defensible. What's the number 1 reason that you think let's try the top 5 reasons startups fail. Just throw an idea out there.
They don't know how much it would actually cost to produce a product.
Yep, costs, yep. Or finance or running out of money.
Maybe they don't go further or like they're not innovative.
Yep, okay, so it's not innovative in the market. Yep.
Sometimes we're ahead of its time.
Ahead of its time, yep. Tell that Henry Ford, yep.
Ego ambitious too much.
Over ambitious, yep.
Not enough research in terms of actually talking what to do.
I'm talking customers, yeah.
Yeah, something like that. Founders are not aware about the environment they are in.
Yeah. So I don't think we've got top 3 yet. What else?
Nobody bought it.
Nobody bought it. All right. So number one reason for startups. Well, this is based on a research of about 1,000 startups.
Yeah, it did go.
Sorry, I got some interference. So 42% of startups fail because there was no market need for their product. So what that means is they built a solution looking for a problem. All right, and it's 42%. It's number 1 by a factor of 2. The next one is they ran out of money, and then number 3 is actually internal team issues between the founders. All right, they're the top 3 reasons startups fail. But by far, the single biggest reason most startups fail is because they built a solution looking for a problem, which is what happened to GridX. Right? They assumed that people would want this great idea. I've got this great app, I've got this great widget, I've got this great product. But they never once asked the customer, do they actually want that? Alright, so I love this quote around testing your ideas. So this guy called Alexander Osterwalder. So in the boot camp we're going to run, one of the things we're going to go through is something called the Lean Canvas. So Alexander's academic came up with this thing called the Business Model Canvas. Amazing tool if you're doing a startup. Is that customers are your judge, jury, and executioner of your value proposition, and they'll be merciless if you don't find fit. Right? So if you don't provide something that actually solves a problem for someone, I don't care whether you're doing. So the area I specialise in is around social enterprises. So businesses that solve environmental and social issues, right? if you don't solve a problem for a customer, and most of the time, for example, the team P2X last year, they set out, these are the winners of the Peter Farrell Cup, so they started out on day one to solve climate change, all right? And so I was their mentor, and the very first thing, as soon as they said it to me, I shut it down straight away, and I said, yeah, that's a noble mission, but nobody cares. It's not because nobody cares about the mission, is that that's not a problem that the average person out there who's going to buy a product is trying to solve. But you go and ask people out here, do you believe in climate change? And should we address it? And I go, yep, absolutely. 2 seconds later, I walk away, completely forget about the conversation. Right? So you've got to make sure you're solving a painful problem for your customer. So let's run into a bit of a pre-launch checklist for your applications going in next week. Right, so we mentioned as you go across the Peter Farrell Cup, you'll actually go through all these steps, and actually you'll go through these steps and then back to one and back to steps 2, and you'll step around. First thing we need to do is make sure we define the problem, which is what we're going to focus on tonight. Next one is identify your key assumptions. So we refer to these as what we call leap of faith assumptions. So these are the things that must be true for your idea to succeed. And then we go into actually conducting experiments. I'll give you some examples there. Don't worry about step 3 for next week. If you can, great. If not, don't too stress about it. Some of you actually may already have your have like a MVP, minimum viable product, that you can actually go and test with someone. So one thing about problems, again, this is one of my favourite quotes when it comes to problems, right? If you think about when people are buying a product or a service, right? So now, in the case of a drill, right, they don't actually want the drill bit. What they want is the actual hole in the wall. If you talk about air conditioning, so yeah, I know the air conditioning is shut off just then. So when we actually come into a building, as a user of the building, I actually don't want an air conditioner, I want comfortable air conditions, right? So you need to make sure you understand the context of the problem that you're solving. What we're going to do today is actually go through a problem statement. So the problem statement is the guts of your business, right? If for any business solution, doesn't matter what it is you're trying to achieve with your product or service, the problem is at the centre of everything. It's how you communicate it to your customers, it's how you decide to prioritise different features and elements of what you're going to build, particularly in the early days, because you won't be able to build everything on day one. The problem statement, which there's a handout we'll get you to do tonight, it helps you identify all the various features and elements that you need to think about, and everything is testable. Alright, and you'll hear us talking about that all the time. Everything that you probably have thought of or idea at the moment is an assumption until proven otherwise. And when you work with your mentors through the PFC process, they will constantly challenge you on when you say, oh, customers, you love this, they'll constantly say, show me the evidence. How do you know that is true? Right? Because everything's an assumption until proven otherwise. So who was here for the information night? Make sure I don't repeat the same jokes. Alright, so, every problem is contextual. So those here the other night, you'll be quiet because I like using this example. A problem occurs at a particular time, at a particular place, people doing a certain thing. So one of the businesses that we were working with recently, a new startup, is in the home renovation market. And they originally designed this app that you could do on the go while you're out going to shops and those sorts of things. But when we actually sat down and talked to customers, the particular time and place that their target audience, so these were typically mothers who were making decisions around the home renovation, they usually had a long day, and the only time they could get down and sit on an online application was after they'd fed the kids, got them to bed, and they were having a glass of red, recovering from dealing with kids, and so they were in that sort of frame of mind. And the product they had actually was designed for a completely different application, so they couldn't understand why people would get used to it. So let's take this glass as an example. So what could I use this glass for?
Holding liquids.
Holding liquid, yeah. All right, let's start with the obvious one. What else? Yep. Oh, you were here. Yeah, catching spiders, good.
Maybe create suction.
Yeah, you could do suction, yeah. Put some hot air in it and stuff it on a cold surface, yeah. You get compression, yeah. What else? Come on, thinking caps on. Magnifying light, or you could use it for splitting the light, so you want to create a rainbow, so you could use it as a kid's toy. Yeah, what else?
Draw a circle, maybe.
Draw a circle, great. What else?
Growing plants.
Growing plants. Alright, holding pens, paperweight. Alright, so that's what, this is your idea at the moment, this is your solution. Right, this is your idea, it doesn't matter where it's at. So how I frame that to an end user is completely different depending on the context of the problem. So if you have a spider infestation problem, have I got the product for you? It's see-through, so you can actually put it over top, make sure you actually caught the spider. It's impervious to fangs, so if they're venomous species, that's completely fine. Catches spiders up to 3 inches in diameter, and it's great fun for the kids to go around and catch spiders. Right? So therefore, how I frame this solution for your problem depends on the context. If you have a drinking problem, probably badly worded, if you need to contain liquid, have I got the product for you? It's made of glass, it's impervious to moisture, you can actually see your drink in there, you can drop ice in it, it makes a great decoration. All right, so you can see exactly the same product, all right, can be framed very differently depending on the problem that I'm trying to solve. All right? So that's why every problem is contextual. All right, so every problem also is not just single dimensional. So every single problem that we face, and when customers make decisions, there's usually 2 elements to a problem, right? So one's a functional problem, so I need to write a report, I need to get from A to B, I need to purchase a product. But there's also, this is Johnny at the top here, but the real Johnny that you're actually talking to with your customer base is this guy, all right? Because there is an emotional layer to every problem that people are trying to solve. And the reason for that is that that's how we've evolved, right? If you go back thousands of years, back in evolution days, and then Johnny the caveman was out in the plains hunting and gathering. When there was a physical threat to your well-being, so like saber-toothed tiger appears out of nowhere, and then all of a sudden your brain starts producing adrenaline and cortisol. If you did not react immediately and run away, you became food for something with really big teeth. Right? Now repeat that process over thousands of years. That's an emotional reaction. Right? Our brains have evolved to respond to emotional signals as a survival mechanism. Right? So when you see people buying stupid things like a knife on daytime online that cuts through a leather shoe, right? But that product's still available now. When people buy stupid stuff, it's because they're responding to an emotional decision to actually purchase a product. Which of these 2 do you think actually makes people make a decision on buying your product or service? The functional reason or the emotional reason? All right. So let me give you a scenario. Right. So imagine you go into the food court. All right, and you want to get a chicken sandwich. All right, so you head off over in this building over here, and you've got a whole lot of shops, and there's 2 shops that sell chicken sandwiches. So one's called Chicken Sandwiches Are Us, and we make chicken sandwiches. All right, and there's all this noise and great smells, and you're really, really hungry. And you look at the menus, and effectively they're exactly the same price, they've got exactly the same product, and as far as you know, they both use that really delicious aioli that you really, really like. On the left-hand side, so at We Make Chicken Sandwiches, there's 10 people, there's a buzz of activity, there's 10 people standing in line, a few people waiting to actually collect their orders. And at Chicken Sandwiches Are Us, there's not a single customer. The place is completely deserted. Right? Which line would you choose? Now, you see this happen in food courts all the time, all right? And now what will be happening in your brain, that most people, about 80% of people, will go to the line with the most people because there'll be some sort of red flag going off in their brain, which is this tribe, it's safer with the tribe type, which is a behavioural thing that's been ingrained in us through evolution, that people on the left must know something that I don't. Therefore, it's safer for me to go onto this group, even though there's 10 people in line, because there's no one buying from there. There must be something going on over there, right? So you get this alarm bell going. Now, when you're out in shopping centres, if you have a look around food courts, right, you always find there's this one poor shop that no one's buying from. The place is packed, and there's this poor attendant standing there looking really bored, and no one buying a single thing off them, right? What they should do is just pay 5 people to stand in line, right? And then they'll triple their business hours. All right, so when you think about your problem, we're about to do an exercise at the moment to do with milkshakes. Every problem has a functional problem and an emotional problem. So when you think about your application next week, I want you to sort of think about that if you're done. Cool. Now we're about to watch this video. So this is the late Clay Christensen, only passed away about a month ago. Amazing guy at, I think it was Harvard. So he came up with this concept of jobs to be done. And so this concept was based on that people hire a product or a service to do a particular job. So I want to do an exercise now before we watch this video. I want to talk about what's the problem that's solving for people buying a milkshake. So why would someone buy a milkshake? And then we're going to watch this video and then I'm going to ask you the same question again. So let's start off with, just throw it out. What's the functional problem that I'm trying to solve by buying a milkshake? Hungry? Yeah, hungry. What else? Too hot? Yeah. Just want to cool down, so I'm hot. Yeah. What else?
Sweet.
You want something sweet? Yeah. Yep. So sweet tooth.
They could be like sad or stressed or something like that, so they want comfort food.
Yeah, comfort food. Yeah. So that's it's also that's merging into the emotional, but yeah. Dieting. Yep. So if you're having like a shake substitute. Read that now. Yep.
Effortless consumption. Effortless consumption.
Effortless consumption. Yep. I'm a lazy eater. Is that what you mean? Lazy eater. Okay. That's on my daughter. Yep.
They want a reward.
Reward. Yep. Yeah. What might be some of the emotional drivers behind buying a milkshake?
If you're depressed, you want something good.
Yeah, so it's probably this one, comfort food. So probably move that down to the emotional.
Healthy replacement for sodas.
Yep. So it feels less bad than a milkshake compared to a soda. Yep. Feels better. Yep.
Peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Yep.
They just want it. They just want it. Like
There's
something
one.
reminded him.
Just desire. Yep. Alright, so most of you are probably too young, not everyone, too young to have kids, but shut the kids up because they're fighting in the back of the car. There might be another one. What I'm going to do, I'm just going to play this video and then I'm going to ask you the same questions again. So that runs for about 6 minutes. And I mentioned before that as you go through this Peter Farrell Cup, there are certain things that you'll hear that you cannot unlearn. Right? This is one of them.
To give you an illustration of how we develop this in a deeper way, McDonald's approached us. And McDonald's is a very sophisticated marketing company. And they have data up the kazoo. And they decided that they needed to innovate in their milkshake product line so that more people will buy milkshakes. And they had data that allowed them to draw a quintessential customer of milkshake customers. And they then would identify this profile of a milkshake customer. It turns out I fit that profile very well. They would then invite people who hit the profile into conference rooms and they'd ask them questions, trying to understand how could we improve the milkshakes so you'll buy more of them. And they'd get very clear feedback. They would then improve the milkshake on those dimensions of performance, and it had no impact on sales or profits whatsoever. So we invited ourselves, and they agreed, that we could try to approach it in a very different way. And that is, there's a job out there somewhere that arises in people's life on occasion that causes them to need to buy a milkshake. And we need to understand what the job is that causes people to buy a milkshake. And so one of our colleagues stood in a McDonald's restaurant for 18 hours one day and just took very careful notes on what time did he buy the milkshake, what was he wearing, was he alone or with other people, did he buy other food with it or just the milkshake, and did he eat it in the restaurant or did he go off in the car and take off. It turned out that about half of the milkshakes were sold before 8:30 in the morning. It was the only thing they bought. They were always alone, and they always got in the car and drove off with it. So we came the next morning and confronted and positioned ourselves outside the restaurant so that we could confront these people as they were emerging with their milkshake. And in language that they could better understand, we asked them, excuse me, you're creating real trouble for me because can you explain what job arose in your life that caused you to come here at 6:30 in the morning to hire a milkshake to get this? What's the job to be done here? As they would struggle to answer why they came at 6:30. We'd ask them, step back a minute and think about the last situation in which you had the same situation, needing to get the same job done, but you didn't come here to hire a milkshake from McDonald's. What did you hire to get the job done? And one guy said, yeah, I hire donuts to do the job, but I can never hire just one. And another guy said, I do bagels, but boy, they're dry and they're tasteless. And so I have to put cream cheese on and steer the car with my knees while I'm putting cream cheese on. And it turns out one of them said, I hired a Snickers bar to do the job, but I felt so guilty. I never hired Snickers again. And one guy said, I never thought about it before, but last Friday I hired a banana to do the job. But it doesn't do the job very well at all. You finish it in less than a minute. But let me tell you, when I go to McDonald's, it is so viscous. It takes me about 23 minutes to suck it up that thin little straw. And I don't care what the ingredients are. All I know is that when 10 o'clock comes, I'm still full. And the job that all of these people were trying to get done was I have a long and boring drive to work. And I needed something that would just keep me engaged with life while I'm driving the car. I'm not hungry yet, but I know I'll be hungry by 10 o'clock. So I also, part of the job is, I need something to eat that would keep myself full when 10 o'clock happens. And that's the job that they're hiring the milkshake to do, and that is they have a long and boring drive to work. And they needed to add the dimensions of it to keep them engaged with life. And from the customer's point of view, the milkshake does the job better than any of the competitors. And the competitors from the customer's point of view are not just in the product category, but they draw from bananas and donuts and bagels, as I mentioned. And so when you think about how big the job is, you have to look at who the real competitors are from the customer's point of view. And they come from very different categories. How big is the market for milkshakes? It's a serious question. Well, who knows? But the size of the milkshake just isn't the sum of the milkshakes of Burger King, Wendy's, and McDonald's milkshakes. But it includes, from the customer's point of view, all of those other attributes of bananas, donuts, bagels, Snickers bars. And when they implemented this insight in the portions of America where they developed it, turned out to be seven times bigger than they had thought when it was marketed only by the attributes. And most markets are characterized that way. There is a lot of non-consumption, and you can understand how to improve it only if you understand the job to be done.
So what's the problem for someone buying milkshakes?
Or it's for people who drive to work, right?
Yeah. So just going through the exercise, so if say your product was a milkshake that you're trying to develop, or a food product. So in this case, and I'll tell you some of the figures at the moment, that McDonald's made some really simple changes, didn't actually change the product at all, and they got a 7 times increased sales by 7 times of milkshakes. Understanding the problem the customer is trying to solve, right? In this case, it was I have a long, boring drive to work, and I just want to stay engaged with the world. But if I'm going to do that, I also want some certain characteristics. I don't want to be hungry by 10 o'clock. All right. So therefore, we've narrowed down the customer is someone driving. So we know from the stats that my customer profile now is someone who's driving to work, they're most likely going to be alone. They're going to be in a hurry to get to work in the mornings, right? So they're whipping in, whipping out, so it's going to be between a certain time in the morning. And we know what they're trying to achieve by consuming a product or service. Now, McDonald's started down the path of doing, they changed the flavour, they put in different ingredients to make it healthier, they changed the viscosity, and made zero difference because none of those attributes had anything to do with the problem these customers were trying to solve. Now, actually, I'll throw it out. What do you think McDonald's did with that information? So he mentioned before that the areas where they made changes, they got a 7 times increase in sales. So they sold 7 times more milkshakes. What do you think they did?
Reduce the diameter of the straw. Reduce the diameter of the straw.
They did actually do that, yes.
Awesome.
Why did they do that?
Because people want something to accompany them while they are driving. So about 30 minutes of drive. So you can, the smaller the straw, the more time they will take to finish the milkshake.
Yeah, so part of the customer feedback was, that guy had a Snickers, right? It was like going really quickly and feeling so guilty. There's so many calories, it's a tiny little thing, and it didn't last any time at all, right? So one of the characteristics was keep them engaged for as long as possible, right? So they did reduce the diameter of the straw.
Well, I was thinking if they increase the diameter of the straw, wouldn't that make people buy 2 milkshakes instead of 1?
No, because the experience, they wanted it to last as long as possible. They wanted that. So one of the things they liked was the fact that trying to say there's another straw. I did an experiment. Actually, first time I watched this video, I went straight to McDonald's and bought myself a thick shake. And it took me like 16 minutes, wasn't 23, but I just out of curiosity to see how long it would take me to get. And my cheeks were hurting by the end of it. Alright, what else? What else did they do?
Thickened the shape.
Thickened it? No, I don't think they did. They just reduced the size of the straw. They didn't actually have to change anything else with the milkshake itself, except the straw diameter.
Have a bigger size.
Right, so think about, remember I said all problems are contextual. So these customers, so we said they're going to be alone, they're going to work. Someone who's travelling to work in a car, what's one thing that they don't have? Time. Yeah, they don't have time. Alright? So now think about the customer experience. What do you think they could have done to, these customers in a hurry, right? I'm off to work, I'm rushing in to get a milkshake, up the back.
Add a lid to it, a lid to the cost, so that
A lid, yeah, sort of close.
get promoted at the drive-through.
Close.
Faster for preparing.
Yeah, 75% there.
They added an extra lane only for
No.
milkshakes.
I'll put you out your misery in a minute.
Do they pre-mix it? And
No.
then pre-mix?
One more, last chance.
They made a separate counter for the drink sections.
Yes, right, so that's what they did. So what they did is so if you go into a normal McDonald's now, right, so the thick shake machine, it's behind the counter, right, and the staff have to serve it. So in the stores where they put this into practice, they actually brought the thick shake machine onto the front counter where you actually place your orders, off onto one side. They put a swipe card on there for your credit card, so you could walk in, swipe it, pick your thing, self-serve, and out the door. All right, and that's all they did. They made the straw smaller, and they put the machine on the front desk because they understood the context in which the problem was occurring for that particular customer. And doing those 2 things, they had 7 times increase in sales of milkshakes in the stores that did that. All right, so that's why understanding the problem is so important to your product or service, because it's how they marketed that to their customers. They would have sent out probably radio ads and things, because if someone's in a car, or who you're going to market to them, you're probably going to put it on radio, because that's what they're listening to on the way to work. Swinging McDonald's at Hunters Hill, with it, try out our new self-serve, you'll be in and out in 60 seconds with your favourite milkshake. All right, they probably would have done marketing like that.
The advertising would be much more important than a couple of those other changes. You wouldn't go from a market of 1 to a market of 7 without some extremely strong advertising
Oh, of
about
course.
that job.
Yes,
If
that's
you're
right.
sitting in the car, you could be having a McDonald's milkshake.
Yeah, but the important was is that marketing, you're saying
Okay.
we've got the best
Solve
flavours
the
of milkshakes,
okay.
right? And so I was actually talking to, I won't point them out, but there was someone here last week who was telling me about their new business they've started, talking about, hey, come to us, we've got this great product or service. And we'll get into this in the pitching session, so through this process we'll also teach you how to sort of communicate your idea. The one thing you always lead with is the problem. All right, so because you want someone to go, yes, I have that problem, tell me more. All right, so if you've got the problem wrong, so McDonald's thought the problem was the flavours or the ingredients, so we've just taken 100 calories out of our new milkshake, and like the driver's out there, shit, you get something, right? You swing in and get your milkshake in, you can get it in and out in under 60 seconds, and it'll keep you busy for the next 30 minutes. if they had the messaging like that, then it's hitting right on the pain point for that customer segment. Right? So understanding your problems is really, really important. So, where's Sophie? Can we get those handouts put on the tables? So one of the exercises, now if you've got to go after the presentation, that's fine, but you make sure you take one of these with you because this will be informative for your application next week. And I'll actually show you how this maps into the application process next week. So this is a problem statement that we use, which is basically a fill in the blank. Right? And each of these characteristics you can see on the problem statement, and we'll do this exercise in a moment for McDonald's milkshakes. So each of these items within the problem statement are testable. Right? These are all assumptions. So who's my target audience? What's the problem they're solving? How often do they have this problem? What's the key activity they're performing at the time? What are they trying to achieve from that goal? Right? And narrowing it down to a niche. So who has the biggest pain point? Right? So the main problem they face is, this is their primary problem, which leads to the emotional drivers. So this is the emotional drivers in here. Today their best option is competitive products, substitutes, but of course, what do they complain about? So think about the bananas. They just go too quickly. It didn't last very long. The Snickers, I felt really guilty. Bagels, I've got to drive the car steering with my knees as I put cream cheese on my bagel. Donuts, I can't just stop at one and then I feel really bad. Right? So these are all the worst outcomes for the customer. Today the best option is to also substitutes and with key trends. So these are your market forces. Right? So these are all the sorts of things you need to articulate in your application next week. You don't copy this verbatim into your application, but these are the topics we want you to think about. If only there was a way, your value proposition, how does your particular idea solve this problem better than anything else out there in the market? What's the impact on the customer? How does that change their life? How does it make them feel? They feel really good because they're engaged with life. And what's the size of the market? So if we were to do this exercise for the milkshake example we just did, so for people who drive cars to work, which is our target audience, it's a constant challenge to keep engaged because it's not a really boring drive to work. Every day, so the time period, so they have this problem every single day. These people drive to work in order to actually just get there on time. This is especially true if you're in an area that has, say you're looking at locations, doesn't have good access to public transport, and the average travel time more than 30 minutes. So you can actually niche down your customer segment. The main problem they face is they have a long, boring drive to work, which makes them disengaged with life and they get to work cranky because they're stuck in traffic for half an hour. Today the best option is to use Snickers, bananas, bagels, donuts, but of course these ones make them feel guilty because they're high in calories or they don't last long enough or they don't actually do the job. With the key trend, so with population growing in, say you're targeting Sydney, the population growth in Sydney, urban congestion is only getting worse, so therefore the size of this market is going to continue to grow. If only there was a way to have a delicious meal that kept me full all the way till 10 o'clock, but also took half an hour to consume. Then customers could enjoy their drive, listen to the radio, and be constantly engaged and get to work feeling happy with emotions. With 2 million cars on the road in the Sydney area, there's a huge impact. There's a huge market we can serve. All right, so that's your problem statement. Each one of those elements are key things you need to think about with your business or your idea. And every single one of these is testable. So you can then, I'll talk about testing in a minute, you can go away and actually, about all this will be assumptions at the moment, you can actually go out and test those. So any questions on that? You guys will do this at the end, but I'm just going through the elements. Alright, so the next step, once you've actually written your problem statement, I mentioned before that pretty much everything you're probably thinking at the moment is an assumption until proven otherwise. And your mentors should challenge you every time you say, we think this, they will say, well, show me the evidence to prove that. And I want to see that you actually then back that up with evidence. So the main assumptions we want to focus on are things that we call leap of faith assumptions, right? So these are the riskiest assumptions to do with your product or idea, right? So these are the things that must be true in order for your business to succeed, right? And we categorise those into 3 types of assumptions. So we have our value hypothesis, right? So do they actually want this? Remember those 42% of startups that failed? They didn't have a good answer for this question, right? Do they want this? Do the customers actually want to buy the product or service? The feasibility hypothesis, can we do this? Right, so someone mentioned something that was ahead of their time. So if you believe that customers want to fly to Mars, maybe we're not in, at least Elon Musk, maybe we're not in the can we do this category for feasibility. And then there's the viability hypothesis. So should we do this? So if we look at like the competitive landscape, if there's a gazillion companies in there doing exactly the same thing with great products that people don't really complain about, is that really the space you want to play in? Right, so think about those three categories for your assumptions. So if we look at, say, Airbnb as an example, and I'll go through some more of these. One of their leap of faith assumption was that people would actually be willing to rent a room from a stranger, exactly like a hotel. And that was a big leap of faith when Airbnb launched. And I'll tell you how they actually validated that in a moment. So any questions on any of those? Right. So once you've identified all your key assumptions, not all assumptions are made equal in terms of levels of importance. So what we do is you need to actually go through and prioritise them. Right? So what you want are ones in this top right hand corner. So we use this matrix. So we talk about how important is that assumption in terms of how critical is it to your business or your idea, and how much evidence do I have. So at this end, I've got zero evidence to support my assumption. I just think people want to go to Mars, right? Because I think it's a cool idea and I want to shoot a car off into space and send it around the sun. Right? So at this end, I'm down this end. Is it really important? If I'm going to build a spaceship to send people to Mars, it's super expensive, so it's probably in that top right hand corner. I want to validate that. Down in this corner, we have, it's really unimportant. It doesn't really matter whether this is true or false because it makes no difference to my business, or I have lots of evidence to support it. And the ones we're looking for in the early days of your idea, which will be during the PFC process, is these ones up in this top right hand corner. So they're really, really important. And that, like, if they're not true, that's a big problem for your idea. And I have little or no evidence to support that. And these are the areas you want to focus on. Right, so this is another one of my favourite quotes by Steve Blake's. Right, there are no facts inside the building, only opinions. Right? So throughout the PFC process, now if you can do some of this before next week, awesome. Right? You can go and actually test your idea outside you, would be a good idea. But if you can't, don't stress it. But just make sure you think about that problem statement and what assumptions underpin it. So what this means is the only way to actually validate your idea is actually go and talk to customers. So in the case of Milkshakes, the team from Clay Christensen's group, and actually ask customers, what's the problem you're trying to solve? Yeah, what are you using as substitutes? And went out and talk to them. And across the PFC, we'll actually teach you how to do this. Right, third step is to design an experiment and turn that assumption into a fact. So whether it's true or false. I'll go through some reasonably well-known startups about some of their leap of faith assumptions, how to do that. So some of the things you want to do the cheapest and fastest experiments possible to get the most amount of information. You want to, as you go through time, start to increase the amount of evidence strength over time. So the first thing you might want to do is just ask, hey, would you buy this product? That's a pretty low cost test. But over time, you might say, okay, will you pre-order my product for me? Is the next level of evidence. So someone saying yes, they would buy your product versus them getting a credit card out are two very different propositions. Right? And the second one has a much higher evidence threshold of getting someone to actually pay for your product before you even produce it. So that's what Kickstarter is based on. Always pick your experiments to give you the most amount of evidence for the least amount of effort. And the whole purpose of doing these tests and these experiments is to reduce uncertainty. So if there's anything that you think you're assuming or you're guessing or you just don't know, then you need to design an experiment. Right? You don't need to do this by next week, you're clear. But across the whole PFC process, you will have plenty of opportunities to do this. Right, so the guys who won the PFC last year, P2X, so they came up with a fuel cell that converted wastewater into hydrogen and high-value chemicals, which is quite a complicated thing. And going through the process, they identified their customer segment was breweries. So they actually just went out and spoke to breweries about their idea. Said, well, here's our idea, what do you think? And they actually got a letter of support from TUIs to say, we love this idea, we want to explore it further. Right? So literally they just set up a meeting and went out and had a meeting and said, look, this is what it does, and that works, and you got that live customer feedback. Right, so there's a whole lot of type of experiments, and we'll actually go through this. I'm not going to go through this now, all the way from really low cost things like my favourite one, if you're doing business to business, and I use this one all the time, the types of work that we do, is a letter of intent. So if you're developing a business to business type product, this is before we build anything. We don't have any manufacturing, we don't have any product built. It's literally an idea. We put together a brochure that describes what the product is. We go and see what we think is the key decision maker within a business. And if they say they like the idea, we pull this letter out and we say, great, and we address it to their boss and says, look, can you sign this letter to your boss that says we should explore this product further? That's it. All they have to done. They're not signing their life away. They're not committing to a contract. Literally says it literally makes them put their own personal reputation on the line to say, yes, I'm going to take this to my boss. Now, if they say no to something so simple, right, that's a big red flag to your idea. So they might, because oftentimes what you find is customers will say, yeah, love your idea, just to get rid of it. Right. I think you're trying to sell them something. Right. So someone's saying they love your idea. It's a letter. So one piece, it's 10 cents to print. Takes about 5 minutes to write. Right, but it gives you really, really solid data. All the way through to these, long time, high evidence rate things like crowdfunding campaigns on Kickstarter. All right, if you run a crowdfunding campaign and people sign up and pledge to support your product or service, that's a pretty good evidence base that you're on a winning product or service. And there's everything in between. So one of the ones we'll do on the bootcamp is like doing a simple landing page, but I'll give you some examples now about some of these ones that organisations did. Who's heard of Zappos? Yeah, one? So Zappos sells shoes online, right? And they're known for their company culture as having the world's best customer service is their whole process. Now, when Zappos started, no one sold shoes online. And everyone thought it was crazy. Like, you have to try them online. Why would anyone buy shoes online? So the founder, the loafer, so their leap of faith experiment, their leap of faith assumption, the critical assumption they had to test was people would buy shoes online. That's what they believed. Right. They don't have no evidence for it. So what Nick did, so he was the founder of Zappos, so he set up a website. So in his apartment building, there was a shoe store downstairs in like a little retail area. He went down to the shop and he took photos of all the shoes on the shelves down in the store downstairs. And then he set up a website and said for sale, shoes online, right? And got people to click. And if someone actually bought a pair of shoes, he'd run down to the store downstairs, he'd buy those shoes, put them in a box, and then ship them off to a person, right? So all he did was literally spend a couple $100 building a basic website. Didn't have any product, didn't have any inventory. He literally just had an apartment that was community located on a shoe store to prove that his idea would work, right? It's now, I don't know how many billions of dollars Zappos is worth these days, but it's like one of the biggest, one of those unicorn startups. And they just sell shoes. Right? But it all started from that one simple validation experiment. All right, Airbnb. So I mentioned before that the biggest risk for Airbnb was that actually people would be willing to rent a room for a night from strangers, just like they would for a hotel. So the way the founders set up, they mocked up, this is the actual website they mocked up back then, because they were coders so they could deal with it. And they just set up mattresses on the floor in their room. There's a big conference on in town, everyone probably knows the urban myth around this. But they basically threw some mattresses on their floor and they got 3 customers doing that as a way of validating it. Right? All the rest of the places on their website were all fake. Right? They just had booked, like as in like booked out. So it created this perception, and the only 3 they had available were their places. But they wanted this check because there was this big conference on, where all the hotels were fully booked, and they had this idea, but they didn't know whether it would fly or not. So they did something really solid. So hopefully with your ideas, you're starting thinking now, well, how could I do something really simple to test my idea? So this is one of my projects. So this is a project we did where we're trying to use behavioural science to get people to make their homes more sustainable during renovations. I mentioned that renovation project earlier. Right, so our leap of faith assumption was the pain points we're designing the entire product around. So in this case, the pain points related to people didn't understand their budgets, they didn't know the process of going through a renovation, and they had a lot of trouble finding trustworthy trades, right? So we had these core assumptions. So the way we actually tested it, we set up a Facebook group, and we sort of recruited people on it. It was like a Facebook group about renovations, and it was all a bit smoke and mirrors, but we put all these posts on there about how to do great renovations and tips and tricks. And then we created a little video. So this was our experiment. of Facebook ads and see if we actually get people to make an appointment to see a renovation planner. And then we rang up and went, oh, sorry, look, we're not quite ready to go yet, but can we put you on the waiting list? Alright, but we just tested people who go for that. And we actually found some of those features of our product that we put into the video when we tested it with consumers, they went, nah, they don't really like that. We then went through to another experiment after we then tested that. Yes, we were on point in terms of the pain points. We then through and then did a wireframing exercise. So before we even built any, because this is a whole supporting online platform, so we did some wireframes. We actually went out and put that in front of people and got them to pretend, like clickable wireframe, pretend they were using the app. And then we ended up building the actual business, right? That'll launch as a startup sometime this year. Right, so that took us a day to do, to make that little video, and it was just done using this little animation platform. The wireframe is a bit more involved, getting UX people and stuff involved, but as we ramped up from each of those experiments, we got more and more evidence to show that we're actually on the right track. Is there a question at the back?
No, I was really know that I think they're using automated advertisement trades because like nobody had the this is I think it's like an ad that lets you create like advertisements pretty easy.
Yeah. This was animation. So this was before that. There are lots of services able to do that. We use one called Cartoon. What it is, you can get free. As part of this, there's a tip for your PFC. You can actually get a free sign up for that. I think for 30 days, which might get you just through the PFC. But yeah, there's lots of different things you can do that to mock stuff up. But the point is, this was the experiment. We had a leap of faith assumption that we needed to test, and the fastest, cheapest way for us to do that, we spent about $12 on Facebook ads to validate that, and we just wanted to see if we could actually get people to actually request an appointment, and we ran that little video, put that in front of customers. So it's a super cheap way to actually validate some of those key assumptions. So the other one is to pretend to be a user, Palm Pilot, right? You little block of wood, people might think you're a bit weird, walking around pretending to use your product, but actually use it yourself and actually see how you would actually use your product or service if it's a physical thing. So their leap of faith assumption was that people would want to use a handheld computer if it will fit in their shirt pocket. The secondary test was what they actually use it for, right? And that was a test of one person, it was just himself, 20-cent block of wood and a few paper printouts, and it turned out to be one of the best-selling products of all time. There's another one of my projects, it's a TV show. So we're producing a TV show around the home renovation market, so it builds on some of this other work around behavioural science. And we wanted to test whether we could build consumer demand for sustainable housing by producing a TV show. And we worked with a research organisation. This was a much bigger experiment where we produced a pilot episode, which I won't show you guys. Just search around about a rebuild on YouTube and find it. But in order to test that we could actually produce a TV show, and then we used this to pitch Channel 9, and this TV show will go on Channel 9 early 2021. Right? So again, we produced a 30-minute pilot. We started off with a 16-second trailer, which is called a sizzle in the TV industry, as a way of actually testing this core assumption. Right, so now to your application. I couldn't get the arrow. Unfortunately, when I designed this and then I reverse engineered it to line up the application, the arrows cross over a bit. But nevertheless, so these are the key questions you're going to be asked in the. Has everyone looked at this yet? The online application. No. All right, so there'll be four key questions you're going to be asked as part of the online application. So one is to describe the problem. All right, so hopefully I've talked about that enough tonight that you're in the right headspace to be able to do that. Next one is to how big and widespread is the problem. So this is your market size, which comes out of these two parts. So these are key market trends in your problem statements you've got there, as well as your market size, which will develop in your problem statement. This one is what's your startup idea. So this is to describe what it is, what's your product or service, which doesn't really fit into this problem statement, but you guys obviously should know what that is by now. And then the last one here is what's your unique value proposition, which comes out of these sections. So these are competitive products. So what are the competitors to your idea, which comes into this top part of your problem statement. And then what's your core value proposition? Why is your idea better than the competitors? Right? And make sure you articulate these things. Don't copy this, just don't cut and paste, because that'll look weird. But make sure you address all those key elements in those boxes. So who's the target audience? What's the niche? What's the problem you're solving for them? What are the alternatives that they use at the moment? How big is your market? What's the key market trends that mean your idea is a good idea? Make sure you articulate all those aspects within your answers to each one of these. And then put your own flavour on it. Right? We want to see teams that have got a bit of culture as part of it, part of what your idea is and what do you stand for. So put your own flavour on it, but make sure you touch on these key areas. Do you want to add anything on that from the ones you saw last year?
Yeah, so just like James said, you know, he's given you the kind of background of how to get to these answers. We don't expect you to go and do your experiments before next Wednesday. We want you to just have thought through, you know, what those experiments might be, or what your market size, you know, how are you going to, what's your initial thoughts on the market size? If you've done, you know, a bit of Googling so you can find some key people and so forth, great, yeah? Some people will have a little bit more of an idea about their product or solution, but we need to be able to see that you can think through all of these things and that you have a bit of an idea about it in relation to your product. So please don't think that we expect you to be out over the weekend, you know, interviewing 1,000 people so that you then have, but we want to see that, you know, you've looked at how many people suffer from diabetes in Australia if you've got a, you know, testing kit, or we want to see, yeah, that kind of thing, that you've got a bit of an idea. So I would say as well that if you're only writing one line, unless you have been to our pitch training, you haven't written enough. Okay, so just, yes, if you can write it in one line at a very early stage, you probably need to be putting in more detail. Okay, but is this your last slide?
Yeah, I think we're going to move on. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so the MCIC team is here. We're open 10 until 5 every day. You can come in and see any of us. Quite a few of our crew are here tonight to help you. And if you are still without an idea but do have a team, we do have the design thinking workshop on Monday. You could sign up for that, and in 2 hours you literally could have the problem, your user, and your solution, and you would just need to do some research on your market. So we've got a lot of opportunities still for you if you're looking to enter. And just remember as well that only the team leader has to be UNSW, a current UNSW student or HDR. Okay, so the rest of your team could be family members, friends from other universities, and so forth. So what we're going to do now is give you a chance to work on these things. I've got a whole bunch of my team here, so if you want to come... Oh, they're waving. My team are waving at the back. We've got whiteboards so that you can jump on a whiteboard if you and your team want to run through anything with us. But this is your opportunity to really knuckle down your application and ask any questions that you might have. If you still don't have a team, one person has said they're happy for me to send their details around to everybody with their explanation sheet. So we've got these little sheets here so that people can kind of get a bit of an understanding of who you are and what skills you have. So if you're happy for us to send your email around to everybody with that copy so they can see who you are and they can contact you directly, then great, do that. And if you haven't checked in, please check in, because I will send the slides through to people who've checked in to this session, so just come and see me. Any questions? Any broad questions before you kind of can meet with us all? Cool. Next Wednesday by 4 p.m. is application deadline. Excellent. Thanks very much, everybody. Thanks for coming. Cool. Okay. And there are snacks down there too, and we've got more snacks. If you're staying for a little while and you need a snack. Sorry. Yes, for sure. So what's your name? Oh, you didn't register? That's okay.